Tyra Banks walked into that gala like she owned the air inside it. Not loud, not desperate for attention, just present in a way that made everyone else seem slightly misaligned. The black silk gown caught the light as she moved, diamond earrings flashing briefly against the walls, and her posture communicated something that couldn't be bought or rehearsed, only earned. Han Ji-suk noticed her the moment she stepped through the entrance. He was mid-conversation with Yoo Min-seo, nodding through something about the seating arrangement, but his eyes had already moved across the room and settled on the woman in black. He looked away, looked back, looked away again. Min-seo kept talking. He nodded. His eyes returned to Tyra. Min-seo noticed. She followed his gaze, something quick crossing her face before disappearing behind a smile. She turned back to him and kept talking, but her voice cooled slightly. Tyra moved through the gala with the ease of someone who never asked rooms for permission. As she passed Ji-suk and Min-seo, close enough for the faint trace of perfume to arrive before she did, Min-seo smiled at no one in particular and said, "Money really can buy confidence these days." Tyra kept walking. Then she stopped. The pause lasted a second. She turned and walked back. The click of her heels on marble drew nearby attention into silence. She stopped near Min-seo. Her hand lifted gently, tapping Min-seo once on the shoulder, not aggressive, just personal. "Excuse me," Tyra said. Min-seo tilted. "What did you just say?" Tyra said. Min-seo blinked, surprise arriving a beat too late. "I'm sorry, are you talking to me?" "No," Tyra said. "I'm talking to the bitter voice that just came out of your mouth." The air shifted. Ji-suk pressed his lips together and glanced briefly at the floor. Min-seo recovered quickly, tilting her head. "I was just saying your dress is very loud. That's all. Some people can carry it." Tyra stepped closer. Not threatening. Not emotional. Completely calm. "Listen carefully," she said, voice level enough to feel gentle. "Don't you ever talk to me like that again." The silence made people forget to breathe. Min-seo stood frozen, champagne glass halfway to her lips. Two women near the sculpture had turned to watch. A photographer lowered his camera. And Ji-suk was smiling. Tyra held Min-seo's gaze exactly as long as she needed to, then turned and walked away. No dramatic exit. No looking back. Ji-suk watched her go. Min-seo turned to him. "Why are you smiling?" He glanced at her, composed. "You should have seen your face." She made a sharp sound and walked toward the bar, chin up, jaw tight. Ji-suk let her go. His eyes had already found Tyra again across the gala floor. What Han Ji-suk does after this turns one cold insult at a gala into something nobody in that room could have predicted. And if this is your first time here, subscribe and stay with me because this story only gets messier from here. For the next 40 minutes, Ji-suk kept noticing her. Tyra moved through the room without chasing attention and somehow drew it anyway. When a reporter stopped her near the photo wall, she laughed at something they said, a real laugh, quick and unperformed. Before he realized he'd decided to, he was already walking toward her. She saw him coming and her expression didn't change, but something in her posture adjusted, not guarded, just aware. "Your dress," he said when he reached her. She raised an eyebrow. "It's not loud," he said. "It's precise." Tyra looked at him for a moment. "You were with the jealous one." "I was. And you let her say it." "I didn't know she was going to." He held her gaze. "I would have stopped it. Or," Tyra said, "I could handle it myself." "Which I did." She tilted her head slightly. "Han Ji-suk. I know who you are. Then you have an advantage on me." "Tyra Banks," she said. "Banks Atelier." Something changed in his expression. Not the polite interest of someone being handed a business card, something more like recalibration. He knew the brand. Anyone with real money in luxury markets knew Banks Atelier. It had spent 3 years being described in industry publications as quietly dominant, which was the most accurate kind of powerful. "You built that yourself," he said. "From the first stitch." He was quiet for a moment. "That's impressive." "I know," she said simply, and the lack of false modesty in it made him laugh, a real one, surprised out of him. He had come to this gala thinking it was another evening to get through. He left thinking about a woman who turned around when she didn't have to, walked back when most people would have kept moving, and delivered an ice-cold correction without raising her voice once. He found reasons to reach her within the week. Jisuk had been considering a luxury fashion investment for 2 quarters. It was a real interest, not manufactured. The timing was real. The numbers were real. But he would be lying to himself if he pretended Tyra Banks wasn't the reason Banks Atelier had risen to the top of his list when there were 4 other viable candidates. He arrived at her boutique on a Tuesday afternoon without an appointment. Tyra looked up from her desk when he walked in. She took him in once, the suit, the calm, the fact that he was there at all, and said, "You again." "I'm considering entering the fashion investment space," he said. She looked at him steadily. "You're lying." He almost laughed. He managed to keep his face neutral for approximately 1 second. "I'm not entirely lying. You're a mafia boss in a costly suit walking into a fashion boutique on a Tuesday to discuss investment." She leaned back slightly. "The investment part might be real. The reason you're here on a Tuesday is not the investment." He sat down across from her without being invited. She didn't stop him. "The investment is real," he said. Banks Atelier was already outperforming older luxury houses in 3 markets. He would have been interested eventually. Tyra simply moved the timeline forward. They talked for 2 hours. He knew enough to be worth talking to, and she knew enough to catch the 2 moments where he was testing her with deliberately wrong information. She corrected both without announcing that she was correcting him, which he found more impressive than if she'd called him out directly. When he left, she walked him to the door and said, "Same time next week if you want to continue." He said, "I'll be here." What followed was a month of meetings that stopped feeling like meetings. Jisuk kept finding reasons to return. Reports sat open between them while conversation wandered elsewhere, and somewhere along the way Tyra stopped treating him like a potential investor and started treating him like someone worth arguing with. She caught him testing her by the 3rd meeting. "You know that's wrong," she said, glancing at him over a report. "Do I? You're being wrong, so I'll correct you." "Why would I do that?" Her eyes narrowed. He smiled once. "Because you're different when you're certain." She looked at him for a beat, then returned to the paperwork. "The investment terms," she said. But she was almost smiling. Sometimes he watched her work after she forgot he was there and thought, with quiet surprise, that people who built real things were rarer than most people admitted. One evening the boutique had emptied hours ago and rain tapped softly against the windows while reports sat open across Tyra's desk. Jisuk loosened his tie slightly and glanced at the clock. "You've been here 12 hours, he said. "So have you. The difference is this is your building." Tyra finally looked up from the paperwork. Her eyes stayed on him for a moment before she closed the file in front of her. "Go home, Jisuk." He leaned back slightly. "Are you ordering me around?" "Yes." A small smile threatened at the corner of his mouth. "Why?" She held his gaze a second too long. "Because you look tired." Silence settled briefly between them. Then she looked back down at the papers. "And I don't like it." Minseo noticed he was disappearing. It wasn't the first time Jisuk had become absorbed in something, but it was the first time she couldn't identify what that something was through the usual channels. He wasn't at the usual dinners. He declined 2 invitations to events she knew he'd typically attend. His assistant gave her vague answers. She went to his house on a Thursday and found his sister in the living room. "He's not here," his sister said, not looking up from her phone. "He's probably with Tyra." The name landed with an ordinary casualness that made it worse. Like it was already a normal thing to say. Like this woman had already become an established fact of his life without Minseo's knowledge or permission. "Who is Tyra?" Minseo asked, keeping her voice even. His sister looked up briefly. "Fashion person. They've been meeting a lot." Minseo left without waiting. That night Minseo searched for the name. Interviews. Magazine covers. Expansion timelines. Banks Atelier, quietly dominant in luxury fashion. This was not some random woman. The realization settled cold in her chest. Jisuk asked Tyra to dinner on a Friday. Not to discuss the investment. He said that clearly when he asked, not business. "I want to take you to dinner." She paused. "That's a different conversation." "It is," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Where?" He took her to a private gallery that opened after hours. Tyra stood in front of a large abstract painting. "It's angry," she said. The artist was going through a divorce, Jisuk added. "You can tell." They sat down and the conversation went somewhere different than it had in the boutique, less structured, more lateral. He told her about taking over from his father at an age when most people were still figuring out what they wanted for dinner. She told him about the first time a department store buyer had told her bank's atelier wasn't the right fit for their floor, and how she had gone home and redone her entire pitch in one night and come back the next morning. "Did they take the meeting?" he asked. "They did," she said. "And I was better." He looked at her. "You make people nervous." She tilted her head slightly. "Only the dishonest ones." Something shifted between them right there, quietly, the way things do when two people stop dancing around a thing and simply look directly at it. He said, "I like you." No preamble. No qualifying statement. Just that. Tyra was quiet for a moment. Then, "I know. Is that all I'm getting?" The corner of her mouth moved. "I like you too," she said. "Which is inconvenient." "Why inconvenient?" "Because you're complicated," she said. "And I don't have room for complications." "You built a fashion empire from nothing," he said. "I think you have room." She looked at him for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, and she let him, and the painting behind them stayed angry while everything in that room became something else entirely. Mincio found her on a Tuesday outside the boutique. She had planned what she was going to say. She delivered it with a composed face and a steady voice, the points landing cleanly. Jisuk's world was complicated. His family had expectations, women who entered his life without understanding that context rarely lasted. Tyra listened to all of it without interrupting. Then she said, "Thank you for the warning," with a tone that communicated she intended to do absolutely nothing with it, and went inside. She mentioned it to Jisuk 2 evenings later, while they were at dinner, framing it lightly. "Your friend came to see me today." He went still. "Mincio?" Tyra nodded. "What did she say?" "She seems very protective of you." Tyra picked up her fork. "She made it clear she doesn't think I belong in your life." Jisuk set his glass down. His expression didn't change, but something behind it did. "I'll talk to her." Mincio came by his office 3 days later in the usual way, casual, unannounced, as she had done for years. She sat across from him, and they talked about nothing important for 10 minutes, and then Jisuk went quiet. She recognized that quiet. "You want to see Tyra," he said. Mincio held her posture. "I just wanted to understand who she was." No, his voice wasn't raised. That was the thing about Jisuk when he was serious. He didn't need volume. "You wanted to intimidate her. I was looking out for you." "You went to her place of business," he said, "and told her she didn't belong in my life." He paused. "That's not protection. That's possession." Mincio's jaw tightened. He leaned back slightly, and the sharpness softened into something that was somehow worse, not anger, but exhaustion. And then sincerity. "I really love her, Mincio." She went very still. The practiced composure she'd worn into the room started doing something wrong at the edges. He watched her and didn't understand what he was watching, not yet. Then she stood up and took one step toward his desk, and something in her face had broken open. "And what about me?" she said. He blinked. "What?" She moved closer, and her hand came to rest on his arm, and her voice had changed into something raw and unsteady that he had never once heard from her in 20-something years. "Have you seriously never noticed?" He looked at her hand on his arm. He looked at her face. And understanding arrived slowly and horribly. "Mincio. I love you," she said. 7 years, Jisuk. 7 years I've been watching you, being beside you, being your person, and you're sitting here telling me you love someone you've known for 2 months. He pushed her hand away gently, stood up, and put space between them. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Some years ago," he said quietly, "I liked you." She froze. "I told you." "You remember." Her face shifted. "You told me," he said, "that we should never cross that line." His voice stayed level, but there was something underneath it that had weight. "Those were your words, Mincio. You said it. And I believed you, so I moved." The silence in the room was total. "There was a time," he said, "I would have given you everything." She made a sound that wasn't a word. "But you told me not to," he said. "And I can't go back to that. It's not something I can go back to." He met her eyes. "I don't see you that way anymore." "I'm sorry. I genuinely am. I have a girlfriend, and I love her so much, you know this." So, I really don't know why you're doing this. Just stop. She went to him again and said, can we look past all that? Then she tried to kiss him. Jisuk held her hand, trying to move her. Then, Tyra came through the door, containers balanced in both arms, and stopped. Minseo was there. Standing close to him, her hand on his chest, her face tilted up, and Jisuk had his hands on her wrists trying to pull them away, saying her name. But none of that registered in the single second where the image burned itself into Tyra's vision. The containers hit the floor. The sound made them both turn. Tyra stood in the doorway, and the look on her face was not rage, it was worse than rage. It was the quiet devastation of someone who had let themselves believe something and been shown precisely how stupid that was. Jisuk pushed Minseo back and said, Tyra. She was already gone. She walked to her car and sat in it and didn't drive anywhere for 11 minutes. Then she drove home and took a shower and sat on her bathroom floor and cried in a way she hadn't cried in years, not from sadness, but from humiliation, from the particular shame of having thought she was reading someone correctly and being wrong. Her friend Camille sat with her on the couch that night while she stared at the wall. You don't have to figure it out tonight, Camille said. I knew it was complicated, Tyra said. This doesn't have to be your fault. I know that. She pulled her knees closer. I'm just angry that it still hurts. Jisuk called 9 times that night. He sent 4 voice notes. She could see the notification previews, but she didn't open them. She turned the phone face down. He called again in the morning. Then a text, please just let me explain. That's all I'm asking. One conversation. She didn't respond. He stopped sleeping properly. Saturday found him in his office staring at reports he wasn't reading. Please just let me explain. One conversation. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Just hear what happened. She read the messages. She still didn't answer. Minseo came to his office on a Sunday. She knocked, which she had never done in her life. He looked up from the desk and his expression when he saw her was not angry. It was empty in a way that was worse than anger. Flat. Worn through. She sat down. He didn't say anything. I'm sorry, she said. He looked at his desk. I didn't, she stopped. Tried again. I didn't mean for it to go that far. She walked in, and I panicked, and I made it worse than it already was, and I'm sorry. Jisuk finally looked at her. Are you happy now? The words were quiet. Completely drained. You got exactly what you wanted, he said. Minseo flinched. That's not what I wanted. She won't talk to me. He leaned back in his chair. She hasn't responded to anything. She watched me try to push you away, and it didn't matter because the image was already there. He looked out the window. I can't even be angry at her for it. She saw what she saw. Jisuk. I can't look at you right now. He said it without heat. Just honesty. I need you to understand that. Not forever. But right now, today, I really cannot look at you. Minseo's eyes filled. I'll fix it, she said. Minseo. Let me fix it, she said. I made this. Let me fix it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to the window. She took that as permission and left. Tyra answered the door on a Wednesday morning and found Minseo standing there. No makeup. No performance. Just a woman who had clearly not slept well and had come to say something she knew she had to say regardless of how it went. Tyra leaned against the door frame and waited. I went to his office that day because I wanted to tell him I was in love with him, Minseo said. I've been in love with him for a long time, and I made a terrible choice with it, and when you walked in he was trying to stop me. He had been trying to stop me. That's the truth. Tyra said nothing. I told myself I was protecting him from you, Minseo continued. But I wasn't. I was protecting myself from losing something I never actually had. She paused. I became someone ugly because I was jealous. And I need you to know that. Tyra studied her. I don't expect you to forgive me, Minseo said. I just needed you to know what was real. She started to turn. Then, if I genuinely loved him, and I think I did, in my own broken way, then I shouldn't be destroying what makes him happy. She said it quietly, almost to herself. He's been miserable. It doesn't suit him. Tyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, do you want to come in? Minseo turned back, surprised. Coffee, Tyra said. You look terrible. Tyra showed up at Jisuk's building on a Friday evening. He came to the door in a way that suggested he hadn't been expecting anyone, shirt untucked, slightly undone, and when he saw her he went completely still. Tyra. She already told me, Tyra said. He blinked. What? Mincio. She came to see me. Tyra looked at him steadily. She told me what happened. What actually happened? Something moved through his expression, relief, and then something more complicated behind it. He opened his mouth. You also, Tyra said, look absolutely miserable. He exhaled. I haven't been sleeping. I know. Your eyes are terrible. I sent you. I know what you sent me. She stepped forward. I needed time. I took it. I'm here now. He reached for her and she let him, and he held on with the particular grip of someone who had spent a week being uncertain about something they very much needed to be certain about. She felt him exhale against her shoulder. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. I know, she said. Stop. They stayed like that in his doorway for a long moment. Then she pulled back and looked at him and said, You're buying me dinner. And you're going to eat something, because I can tell you haven't been doing that either. I've been eating. Ji-suk. Not well, he admitted. Exactly. She turned toward the elevator. Come on. Ji-suk met Mincio at a cafe the following Tuesday. They sat across from each other and neither of them said anything for almost a full minute, which would have been strange for any other two people, but between them had always been a comfortable currency. Then she said, I'm sorry. For all of it. I know, he said. I handled everything wrong. I handled you wrong. I handled her wrong. I handled my own feelings so wrong that she stopped. I don't know when I became that person. He looked at his cup. You've always been afraid of losing people, he said. I just didn't realize I was one of the people you were afraid of losing. Her eyes went glassy. That's the worst part. You were always there. And I still managed to. Hey! He looked up. You hurt me. She pressed her lips together. I know. I mean that. You actually hurt me. I know, she said again, quieter. He held her gaze for a moment. But you're still my family. The breath she let out was shaky. That doesn't go away because you made a mess, he said. You've seen me make messes. He picked up his cup. But no more destroying my relationships. That's done. She laughed, and it was wet at the edges. Deal. I mean it. Ji-suk, I said deal. He reached across the table and she grabbed his hand and held it, and they sat in the quiet of a Tuesday morning with the particular peace of two people who had broken something and had chosen to repair it rather than discard it. The next several months became the most grounded period of Ji-suk's life in recent memory. Banks Atelier announced a capital partnership in January, which the industry publications described as a strategic coup, and which Ji-suk described to no one as the best professional decision he'd ever made that had started as an excuse to see a woman. The Seoul flagship expansion went into planning. Tyra flew to Paris twice, and he flew out once to meet her, which she hadn't asked for but hadn't stopped him from doing either. She met his family at a dinner in February that she had prepared for with the same focused efficiency she brought to everything. And his mother had spent 40 minutes asking her questions with the specific warmth of someone who had already decided the answers, but wanted to enjoy the conversation. His younger sister had pulled Tyra aside at one point and said simply, He hasn't looked this settled in years, and Tyra had taken that in quietly and not known quite what to do with how much it meant to her. Mincio came to the boutique opening in March and stood in the back with a glass of champagne and watched Tyra work the room. Afterward, she had found Tyra and said, You're very good at this. Tyra had looked at her and said, I know. But thank you. And Mincio had laughed, and it had been real. Ji-suk took her back to the original gala venue on an evening in April when the space was otherwise empty, arranged through the same kind of quiet favor that men like him were good at arranging. They walked through the main hall and Tyra looked at the space with the slight private expression she wore when she was thinking about something. You know, she said, I almost didn't come back that night. Back where? When she said what she said. I was going to keep walking. He looked at her. What made you turn around? I was tired, she said simply. Of letting things go that shouldn't be let go. He reached for her hand. The first night I saw you, he said, I thought you were terrifying. She turned to look at him. The corner of her mouth moved. And now? He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Now I think I'd be stupid to live without you. She saw the box and went very still. He opened it. The ring was precise, not loud, not excessive. Just exactly right. Tyra Banks, he said. You corrected me, argued with me, saw through everything I tried, and still stayed. I would like you to keep doing all of those things. For a long time. She looked at him. At the ring. At him again. Yes, she said. He slid it onto her finger, and when he looked up she was smiling, not the composed version, not the professional version. The real one that she didn't produce for rooms or cameras. Just for the moment. Just for him. The wedding was in June, at a venue that Tyra had selected in 40 minutes and Jisuk had immediately agreed to because by now he knew when her instincts were perfect and had simply stopped arguing. Minseo stood at the front of the hall, standing beside where Jisuk waited, wearing something from Banks Atelier's spring collection. Before the ceremony, she had found Tyra in the preparation room, and they had stood together for a moment without needing to say anything about where they had both come from to get here, and then Minseo had pulled her into a hug that was brief and real and said simply, "He's lucky." Tyra had said, "I know. Don't tell him." The doors opened. The music began. Jisuk watched Tyra walk toward him, and in his expression there was none of the performance that public moments usually required from him, just a man looking at a person who had turned around when she didn't have to, walked back when most people would have kept moving, and through that single choice had changed the entire direction of his life. She reached him. "You look terrifying," he said quietly. "Good," she said. They faced forward. Minseo stood at his side. So it ended where it began, in a room full of people who had no idea how much one moment would change everything. But tell me honestly, do you think this was fate or just three people making very human mistakes? If you enjoyed this story, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who loves emotional drama like this.